made, I think Coinbase disclosed people who did above a certain amount of trading, and then those people had unexpected calls, I'm sure, quietly from the IRS. Hey, where's the gains? We have a record of all the transactions you did. Where's your filings? I mean, people are really delusional about privacy in crypto, but there are companies like Chainalysis. They're a startup company that essentially works for all the three-letter acronym agencies. What they do is they analyze not only all the blockchains and the transactions between them, but they do data set overlays. But from the establishment's perspective, you can think about the evolution to digitize every single asset, every single transaction, every part of our digital and our financial life. I have this theory that all the big problems in the world are solvable, and they're already solvable. We just got to get the wrong people out of the way.
Do you want to save some serious money? Learn how a simple gadget can double your gas mileage while creating less pollution. This simple gadget does all of this while giving your car more power and longer engine life. Learn more with the link below. Also, have you thought about learning more about this technology so you can sell it and make extra money on the side? Gadget Man has a special promotion on their 2018 shop guide and training manual. They're offering it for $500 off this Christmas. You can get the full set of Gadget Man's special bits, a minimum of 20 hours one-on-one consultation with Gadget Man. You'll have digital copies of all the information. It has over 25,000 words. You get telephone support and diagnostics and full access to the forums for sharing and troubleshooting. He guarantees that you'll make $400 an hour in your spare time working this side business. So if you need extra income this year, click the link below and learn more about this great opportunity. Welcome to Business Game Changers. I'm Sarah Westall. I have a brilliant person coming to the show. His name is Kevin Lawton, and I'm excited. I'm glad that I got to meet him and that we're going to start doing more shows together. He started off at the MIT labs, and he's brilliant. He started off there, and then he did even cooler stuff once he got out of that environment and started his own companies and worked on. He explains his background as we get going, and we're going to start to connect the dots of blockchain and AI and SEC. What the SEC is doing, they're doing interventions. They're what the central banks are doing, how they're taking everything and digitizing it on the blockchain. And, you got to understand how that's going to relate to us as humans and what that means and how that's going to automate things, how they're going to control cryptocurrencies. But he's putting the whole puzzle together. And it's a great conversation. And I love that because that's what I like to do. I like to put the big picture puzzle together in all these areas that don't seem to make sense. How can these possibly be related? But they are, and it starts to make sense as we start putting these puzzle pieces together. He is great. He's been on YouTube maybe for a few months, and I think he's a couple thousand subscribers, but he's growing quickly because people are starting to find him and go, wow, this guy's brilliant. And I really highly recommend that you look into his stuff. But before we get into that interview, I want to remind you that the Master Brain Masterclass, there's going to be a encore weekend. So if you missed any of that, you can watch the whole thing. But they have 10 free ebooks that you can get right now. If you sign up for the class, you can access all these different ebooks, different ways that you can get your brain working better, detoxify your brain, all sorts of things. I really highly recommend that because you get the 10 free ebooks on top of all those free seminars. If you don't have time, you can purchase the whole thing, but if you don't want to, you can watch the free seminars and get those 10 ebooks. And then also the EMF conference summit is going on ways that you can protect yourself. And we talk about this as well, not the EMF summit, but we talk in this interview about the dangers of all this Wi-Fi and electronics that we have, and he's brilliant, so he'll explain a lot of that. And I wasn't meaning to even get into that because of this EMF conference. It's just something that people need to be aware of, that what we're bombarded with really is dangerous to our health. So I have the link below for the EMF summit as well. And again, he sticks around for my patrons, and we get into what does it mean when AI starts taking over everything, and what's the practical ramifications to society? And then we kind of veer off into a couple other topics. It's hard because I get so excited when I talk to brilliant macro thinkers, and then we can start relating all these different things. And he's absolutely great to talk to. So let's get into that interview now with Kevin Lawton. Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining the program.
Hi, Sarah. Great to be here. Listen to a lot of your stuff.
Well, I really wanted to have you on. I scanned through your background and your videos, and I said, okay, this guy is thinking different. I know your background is at MIT, and I want you to talk a little bit about that, but it looks like you've just really branched out into, your mind is really going in different directions, and you're not really anchored to anything. But what did you start off doing at MIT, and what have you done since? You worked at an MIT lab, and then you did other really cool stuff.
I started at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. I worked at space-based radar and satellite communication groups. And interesting thing about MIT and the labs is they're kind of proud of a lot of people who start companies thereafter. They even have a book in the library at Lincoln Lab where all the startups that have sort of stemmed from there. After Lincoln, I started my first startup company, and that was essentially modeling an entire Intel PC and software. So it was an emulation package. And it turns out that software was used as the R&D for people who are working on virtualization, which is probably like the most important technology in cloud computing today. It was even used as like VMware is a big name in virtualization. And they actually used it when they were researching it at Stanford. In fact, here's a little tidbit. They weren't actually going to do virtualization for the PC architecture. They were doing it for some server architecture. And then an intern found my software and said, hey, look, maybe we can break into the PC market. And that's how that happened.
Oh, that's interesting. It's so interesting, so many of the things that you do, because, you haven't gotten credit for it, but maybe you have in the inner circles. But there's so many interesting things that you do, like some of the stuff I did, my background as well. And you see it permeating through the industry, but it never comes back to you necessarily. But it's cool that it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's there's a great saying: you can do anything you want in the world as long as you don't want to take credit for it.
That's true. Whatever.
So
I see that now
credit.
Sometimes. Yeah, I'm like, okay, whatever. At least, and that's if you can influence things in a great way, then that's a better goal, anyways.
After that, I essentially have been in a series of startup companies. I've worked for Linux companies, which is open source. I've worked for microprocessor design companies, doing like aggressive microprocessor designs, and lots of tech stuff. I've been an author. I wrote the crowdfunding revolution back before crowdfunding was legal for securities, so you couldn't use like Kickstarter for startup companies, for example.
Yep.
These days, you can have a portal like that. Kickstarter doesn't do it. I think they're getting into it, but so I was an author, and I kind of got to know everybody in the space when I was researching it, and so that ended up landing me talking to the White House Office of Science and Technology, because they heard about this crowdfunding thing, and they're thinking, what are we going to do with all this, and what does this mean, and is this good for jobs and everything? So I ended up talking with them early on, and there was a huge network of us, kind of activists and people trying to get it passed. And the short story is that culminated in the Jobs Act. The Jobs Act had a bunch of components, but one of them was legalizing, giving us small exemptions essentially for kind of a Kickstarter type portal for real startup companies. So we kind of changed the face of angel investments and venture capital.
Excellent. And, wow. Okay. So you're right in the crux of all these things.
Yeah, I'm kind of a leading edge guy. Like to me, what's happening now is kind of slow, and boring.
I know.
Like riding the edge. And then last year I wrote a Kindle short, which is a whole new crypto economic model based on my observations that the current crypto model is it's not very good, actually. And these are the kind of things we can get into.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about. And one thing that you said, we kind of did a laundry list of different ideas that we can talk about. And People are trying to figure out where the governments are at when it comes to cryptocurrencies. And, I'm like, they're not going to just give away their power. They're going to want to control this stuff. But one thing that you said was the SEC interventions that are going on. Can you explain that? What is the SEC doing?
Okay, so last year, here's the evolution of it. Last year, there was the DAO, the DAO, sort of a decentralized venture fund. People tried to get going, circumvent the system. That failed, and so the SEC did sort of a case study in public by releasing their analysis of how it was a security, and had it not failed and whatever, they would have gone after it. It's sort of a template to tell people, look, we're watching the crypto space, and here's an analysis that doesn't really matter anymore. It's kind of moot, but you better pay attention. And thereafter, they started going after some of the ICOs that funded. Essentially, they were securities. There's it's kind of a complicated explanation of what a security is and what's not, but essentially they were falling into the security categories, and they started going after the ICOs. In fact, they were actually doing something that was kind of nice, as compared to how regulators usually work. They were watching some of the ICOs before they started funding or during the funding, and they were calling some of the people involved in it and saying, look, this is the SEC. We can't give you advice, but it's always good to have a securities lawyer involved. And that was your cue that you should probably shut down your ICO, because
That's a
they're calling
threat.
you. It is. It's a lot better than actually doing the ICO and then getting shut down, though. So,
I suppose. At least, but what they were planning on doing, was it illegal?
um, it's hard to say, because what a lot of them did was they took the cue, and they stopped the ICO. Some of them were in process and they returned the funds. It was probably a smart move. If they bothered calling you, they were probably, at least somewhere in the gray area, if not, in the securities category. So,
But let me ask you, were they doing it because they didn't want to have to deal with any of that expanding? It's an intervention of keeping a growth market from happening. Or were they really trying to save, because there's so much fraud and corruption. So I'm to the point where I don't even trust the SEC. I don't trust anybody anymore, because if they were really legitimate, there'd be a lot of people going to prison, right?
right.
So when they're intervening like this, why are they intervening? Are they intervening to do something legitimate and actually do their role? Or are they intervening because they don't want it to step on the toes of other people's cash cows that have more power?
I guess you could say some of both, but I have to say that, at least from the ones that I heard, that they, called privately, people that would, tweet about it, or I'd hear about it, in the grapevine. I would say the SEC was probably right. They probably were security, and they did them a favor in this case. I'd say the large percentage of them, they actually did them a favor. But it is easier if they put the message out there to be careful, get a securities lawyer, and don't just pop off ICOs, and then it makes their job easier as well, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So that part of the regulation, I didn't really have a big problem with. I'd rather get a call, and I wouldn't be so foolish as to make an ICO without a securities lawyer or somebody analyzing. So that was part of it, but then they also started shutting down ICOs like legally as of last year, and for securities violations. And in fact, actually, some of the so the U.S. is bizarre in that there's federal securities laws, and then each state has its own like SEC essentially. So you can get the state regulator hitting you or the feds hitting you by the SEC. So some of the states actually shut down ICOs last year, and then along the evolution path this year, the targets are people who promoted, and advisors, especially people who took some of the coins allocated to them for promotion of the ICOs. If it's a security and you're promoting a security, then you're up against touting laws. So you're essentially, you need to be like registered, and that, you need to make sure that what you're doing is legit as a security and all that. So there were a lot of YouTube personalities that were taking coins and if so, you really want to make sure that you're, advertising, hey, look, I'm taking compensation for this, but you also want to make sure that you had to look at the company. If it's a security, you don't want to be involved in that in any case, even if you disclose things. So that's this year's thing is they're pretty open about their going after promoters.
Okay, so they're making these companies really follow the rules and letting other ones skate, which, okay. But now when you look at that, there were a lot of people that have huge gains on like Bitcoin and stuff. Now, is that going to be a problem for people?
Um, well, the IRS has another angle. So there's a whole plethora of regulators. Commodities, you have CFTC, and securities, SEC, taxation, you have IRS, and so forth. And then we can get in later. There's money transmitter laws, the AML, and KYC, and all that. But the IRS, that was last year. Well, basically, very few people have filed gains for cryptos, and it's been very opaque exactly how the taxation laws work. It's a lot more clear now. The IRS was barking about people not not filing, and yeah, there'll be they made I think Coinbase disclose people who did above a certain amount of trading, and then those people had unexpected calls, I'm sure, quietly from the IRS. Hey, where's the gains? We have a record of all the transactions you did.
Oh,
Where's your
geez.
filings?
Well, some
Yeah,
people
so
think it's going to be like a control file on some of these people, almost.
yeah, especially like if you made gains a while ago and you already filed your taxes and you're kind of like, hey, what do I do with all this stuff? Do I file amendments and all that? And then on top of that, you can almost think about the erosion of privacy in crypto as part of the regulatory encroachment because when people thought, it wasn't well placed, but when people thought there was essentially privacy in crypto, then they weren't bothering with things like filing taxes. But as they're learning and there's more techniques to get access to like who's attached to each wallet address and who owns what cryptos and what their transactions were, then they can essentially get in and figure out what you should have paid in taxes and then kind of come after you. So we can get into that too. I mean, people are really delusional about privacy in crypto, but there are companies like Chainalysis. They're a startup company that essentially works for all the three-letter acronym agencies, and they
You
do
mean
data stuff.
intelligence, CIA, FBI, NSA?
IRS regulators, everybody that would want access. And what they do is they analyze not only all the blockchains and the transactions between them, but they do data set overlays. So like recently, I think it was last year, or was it the beginning of this year, I think Congress sold us down the river on letting the ISPs sell your traffic or whatever, whoever you're talking with, your IP addresses and stuff. Well, that would be a data set, right? So they could pull in like who who your browser went to or your apps went to, and then overlay over the blockchain transactions. Just keep overlaying data sets, get information from Coinbase, all the exchanges, whatever services, payment processors, and overlay all of them, and then de-anonymize essentially crypto transactions.
Are there any cryptos that are private?
The two that people tend to use are Monero, which I wouldn't use as an obfuscation technique, which is not usually a good thing. And then there's Zcash. Zcash is probably the most private, but there's a little bit of sketchiness about the organization around it. There's always sketchiness, Sarah. Everywhere you look, no matter how good the technology is, there's a sketchy level somewhere. But Zcash was zero knowledge proof. It's a pretty interesting technology that lets, like, if we want to exchange some information and we want to make sure that it came from each other, like I could tell you, okay, there's a number above 20 and I could prove it to you and you could know that it's proved, but I don't have to transmit the number over the internet. We can do that with ages. We can do that with crypto transactions. I think it was the actual technology was developed by the Naval Research Lab. It's an NRL technology for communicating things in the in the war theater, so to speak, without actually disclosing the information. Probably Zcash, but my way of looking at it is, I hate to say this, but I'm just not trying to be anonymous with the crypto. You're just going to attract attention. At best case, you're going to attract attention.
Well, let's talk about the government. They ended up doing things that everything's becoming so much more advanced technology-wise, right? Google and all these other companies are pretty much taking over running a business. Everything is dark web between organizations. People think the dark web's this scary thing when really all big companies operate on the dark web. It just means it's not tracked. It seems that Congress is, they're filled with lawyers, people who have very little technology background, but the world is quickly becoming high tech. Are they just being passed by and are just a bunch of zombies sitting there not knowing what they're confronted with? I'm saying it really in a in a way that is kind of mean, but is it true?
Well, it is true in the sense that if you think about what kind of knowledge would you have, how much information would you have to track to be an effective Congress critter? You would have to understand, all the cutting edge stuff because you're supposed to be legislating forward, not, 10 years behind. So you need to know about genetic research and metamaterials and all the blockchain and crypto stuff and privacy stuff, encryption stuff, space stuff. I mean, alternate energy, alternate medicine. There's, people like you and I, we follow a lot of this stuff, but the Congress critter, you're pretty much just trying to make sure that you can campaign for your next term or, do the bidding of whatever lobbyists you're going to get paid for next.
I think they could be snowed.
It would, even if they had absolutely good intention,
I mean.
they would easily be snowed because like here's a friend that went to a Harvard Business School. They would do reports for banks or even the Federal Reserve, whatever. And he told me, he said, look, you come in and you tell us what you want. Like you want to be on side A or side B of an equation, and we'll make a rock solid report that supports your side. So you could, and then somebody's reading it thinking, oh, good, it came from Harvard or some whatever think tank. I'm just going to accept this because what do I know? How are they going to diligence the thing properly? You need really macro people in Congress. You can't have lawyers.
You really can't. I mean, having some law experience and knowledge is just another aspect of what you need. But if you, in this day and age, if you don't understand high tech and have a macro understanding of how all this stuff is interrelated,
sure,
you can completely be snowed.
Well, here's something that would help fix it. I have a whole bunch of solutions. I have this theory that all the big problems in the world are solvable, and they're already solvable. We just got to get the wrong people out of the way. So if you do software open source style, which is most of the blockchains, you have like a GitHub repository. And for people that don't know what that is, it's just a repository for the code, and everyone develops with the same repository so that every change I make can be seen. It came from me. You see what the change was. Well, why don't we do the entire evolution of all the way from bill to law in a GitHub repository made custom for making laws? So from the first line of text that goes in, every change goes in, it's annotated with every party, and if it's done from a proxy is putting it in, they have to annotate who it was for. So we just see in open right from the beginning of a law who it is, so we can figure out what's being done, and then the experts can opine on it. We could turn this into a whole app, right, where people can figure out what kind of laws they're interested in. We can see what changes are going in, and the experts can weigh in a lot earlier, and we can see who's making these laws now, can't we? I don't know why we don't do that.
It'd be completely transparent. Now, that would be a good use of technology. Do you see a dark side with that? Is there any way that technocracy can take hold with doing that?
Well, if we mandate that, people will try to subvert it by having proxies and then not taking credit for it. But it'll be pretty easy that if Senator X surfaces a change, and they're like, oh, yeah, that was my idea. And it's 2,000 pages and it's, hey, it looks really good for us. At least we'll know. We'll know whether, they tell the truth or not. We'll have a pretty good idea. But also we won't see these deals where a bill is surfaced with, N thousand pages all at one shot. And where did it come from? And why did it happen 2 days after an event,
And why is it happening on Christmas Eve?
Yeah, exactly.
Because everybody be ready to watch, because that's when all the big things happen. Christmas Eve, when we're all doing other things. Well, that's just what they do.
Yeah. Well, you can put a time lag, put breaks on, once something's made a changes, amendments, then there's a delay so people can look at it. These are just really common sense things that when you think about it, you realize, my God, we've been doing, whether it's GitHub or something like it for, the evolution of software since decades and decades. Why would we not do lawmaking like that? It's insane.
Well, I think it would be that's a good use of technology. I get worried about the voting machines because they're all corrupted. Those are, a little kid in Florida hacked into a voting machine in 10 seconds. So they're worthless. You can hack into anyone, any election can be rigged, and especially the close ones, you can rig any of them. If somebody wins by a landslide, it's really hard. But that you can even do that if you can get enough propaganda behind you. But this sounds like a good use of it. Technology, it's scary. Now, you were talking about another thing is the cryptocurrencies and AI, where that all comes together. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think it's good to back up and see where we are, the macro picture of what crypto and blockchain is from the establishment's perspective. This is not to say, let's state it in the positive. There's a lot of real people doing a lot of real things with crypto and blockchain. But from the establishment's perspective, you can think about the evolution to digitize every single asset, every single transaction, every part of our digital and our financial life.
And are they doing that? Are they actively trying to? Okay, that's what.
Absolutely,
that's what people are worried about, because that'll be that's a complete society is being put on the blockchain. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, and you could just think about it as digitized. Whether it's blockchain or some database or whatever, some set of technologies. So all the way from 1996, there was a paper that surfaced through MIT mailing list. It was called "How to Make a Mint," and it was written by the NSA.
Mm-hmm. I think I've seen that. I think I forwarded it to some people. Keep going.
Yeah, that's essentially like a prototype white paper for Bitcoin. Right. And then 97 it was in an academic journal. Well, you have like over 10 years later, you have Bitcoin surfaced through some quasi-anonymous guy, Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah, with BS. Okay.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it. Looks like there's probably a team and it surfaced through one person, right?
Well, when the NSA had a whole document, early research paper on it, and then all of a sudden this comes out, it's backed by.
Yeah, the title's interesting, How to Make a Mint, because the Russian cybersecurity firm, Kaspersky, I think it is, they just came out and said, Bitcoin was created so the intelligence agencies could make some money, make some quick money. So it's funny they have a thing called How to Make a Mint, right?
So do you think that the intelligence agencies are the ones that have the biggest wallets?
Oh, absolutely. Or the people that are
killing off of that?
The people that are in the system, we should say.
Okay.
That's all part of a complex. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Of course. And they have probably have investments in the biggest mining, operations and the mining pools and the crypto. Well, okay, so you have the digital currency group, dcg.co, for people who want to go on the website. Click on their portfolio tab. The question is not who are they invested in crypto. Try to find somebody they're not invested in crypto. And then there's another group like them. It looks a little bit, similar, but essentially there's a very small number of. There's like a spider in the middle of the web, kind of, investing in everything crypto. And it's capitalism, I suppose, but I imagine it's more sketchy than that. So yeah, if you just look at it as the establishment in general, they have their hooks in crypto everywhere on the exchanges, and then on the technology and the mining, but also the regulatory side. So in terms of essentially corralling all the energy from crypto. So people got locked in the sort of anarcho-capitalistic concept of Bitcoin that, oh my God, it's the people's currency, so this is ours, we're going to revolutionize, and heck with all the central banks, right? Well, the reality is, if you were the establishment and you wanted to allow people to invent their own electric fence around them.
Are they laughing at people behind the scenes?
Well,
does it get to a point where it's funny for them? You know what I mean? It's painful knowing that.
Yeah,
keep going.
It's gotta be.
Yeah,
it's gotta be, right. So if you're the establishment, you don't want to invent all your technology. You get the people both having their own, in their own volition, moving forward in a direction and creating new technology, and then you just kind of corral it by investing and by regulation. And the regulation side that we started talking about. If you sort of let the momentum go, and then you start as it's expanding, you start corralling it incrementally, the taxation and regulation and all this kind of stuff, securities and money laundering. KYC is, if people don't know your customer or client, KYC is just, it's everywhere. It's getting forced in everywhere. And in order to really if you're going to be a company doing real business with blockchain, you're going to have KYC, which means you need to know your customers, which means there's just going to be no privacy, and you just pretty much give it up. So
this should have been understood by people. The government wasn't just going to let you go.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're not
right?
They're not going to let it free will.
Okay.
They do it when it's small, let it get its momentum, and then they capture it with all the usual techniques. And here's an interesting thing. Miners that mine Bitcoin, if you have what's called a virgin Bitcoin, which is you mined it into existence and it's never been transacted, then you don't have any problem with the establishment thinking, well, maybe that Bitcoin went to the hands of some terrorist, or they were running drugs or whatever, right? These are actually worth a premium over a regular Bitcoin. A tainted or a dirty Bitcoin that's been through a bunch of hands and God knows where it's been is worth less, actually. And so people who are investing, big money is investing, tends to like to buy the virgin coins because they haven't been tainted. That should tell you something that's coming, that there'll be, even within like a Bitcoin, which is the big kahuna in crypto, there'll be whitelist and blacklists.
Mm-hmm.
And there's anything that's a privacy coin, that's just blacklist. Unless you want to self-identify your transactions and your IDs and stuff, your wallet addresses, unless you want to do that, you're going to be like on the blacklist. And so you can operate in some dark market thing, but how are you going to get on a legitimate exchange?
They just won't let you use your coins.
Yeah, you'll have to use it in a like a Silk Road type of fashion.
The
and
black
there'll be
market,
an economy for that, but it won't be super handy for most of the people. You won't be going to Starbucks and spending your coin that way.
Well, they'll figure out how to launder it, right? I would think.
Yeah, the interesting part about that is you would almost think the establishment would be really good at laundering the money and allowing a dark market so they could use it, and making it very difficult for regular people to effectively use it.
Oh God, that's so crazy. I mean, we've gotten we get so cynical that we start figuring out what ways are they going to abuse stuff.
Yeah, but here's the thing: no matter whatever the craziest idea you have, if you're thinking about it, someone's already beat you to it. That's how I've arrived.
In the mob underground of the world criminal cabal.
Yeah, I'm pretty creative, but every time I think of an idea, I realize now that someone's already figured that one out.
Well, I have had arguments. My dad will say that, and I'm like, okay, this is where, when you're at the edge of understanding of things, because everything is a linear path. You learn something from something you learned before. Nobody learns something by just taking a huge leap. They get there linear. It might appear like a huge leap because to you, you're way back here, and they're like, way the heck up here. Tesla, he took a linear path too. Or unless it's planted somehow, and you get into woo-woo stuff. But in general, everything's like, so my thing is, well, no, everything is linear. So whoever's at the very edge, the farthest out, has come up with an original idea. So there are original ideas.
If you're lucky. Yeah. And you have spontaneous ideas that pop up in a lot of people's heads at the same time too. So actually, you mentioned, well, we talked about the feds and all that. We should probably talk about where the central banks are at with crypto.
Well, okay, let's talk about that. And then I do want to get into AI and because that's a big deal, because the AI stuff, people are concerned about AI and how that ties into, now you're talking about everything being digitized on a blockchain and how that ties into AI. And actually, I want to tie it into technocracy as well. Start tying these things together, putting this puzzle piece together for people.
I think it's the best thing that we could do for people.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that first?
Yeah, let's continue with that.
Okay.
I have 2 additional items that you might be interested in for gifts this Christmas. The Elite Tactical Backpack. It has 7 roomy outer compartments that keep crucial gear and items safe. It also keeps tools ready to access in an emergency situation. This bag is military grade. It has a mole system and allows you to add extra gear on the outside of the bag. It also feels great. It has plush foam straps that won't dig into your hips and shoulder. It has a hydration bladder compartment and a bomb-proof 600 denier nylon. It's tough all over and only weighs 3.2 pounds. And the price has been slashed from $90 to $29.99. What a great gift this would make. You can also get, as an additional item, this combo pack. It's an ultra-powerful police-grade 18% pepper spray with an ultra-discreet 3 million volt stun gun. I am getting these for every one of the women in my family. I believe we should all be carrying this for self-defense. And with gun laws becoming stricter than ever, what a great option for women in your family or even men in your family to be safe. With purchase of any other item, you can get this for only $29. So click the links below to find out more information.